The World Bank and Ethiopia have signed loan agreements totaling $1.72 billion to enhance electricity and water supply, as well as to facilitate the movement of food to markets. The bank will allocate $523 million to expand the Horn of Africa's nation's electricity network and boost renewable energy generation. An additional $500 million will go towards two projects aimed at boosting access to food markets, including improving road networks in rural areas. Ethiopia, which has also experienced foreign currency shortages, continues to feel the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, a two-year war in the northern Tigray region, and drought, floods, and locust invasion in parts of the country. The remaining World Bank funding will be allocated to improving water supply and supporting programs in towns that employ disadvantaged youths. Typically, World Bank loans carry low to zero interest rates and have repayment periods of 30 to 40 years.
And Africa's trade volume is projected to shrink in the first half of 2024 as Iran-backed militants continue to disrupt the trade flows on the Red Sea route, the world's main trade route to most container ships. The report compiled by the Afreximbank on the implications of Red Sea attacks on African trade and macroeconomic stability also said that African countries face the risk of accelerating inflation following the attacks on ships using the vital trade route. The report stated that the Red Sea is a major trading route, accounting for about 15% of global shipping traffic, linking Europe to the Middle East and parts of Africa.
The Ministry of Steel Development has debunked allegations by a civil society organization under the aegis Alliance for Credible Legislative Conduct, ACLC, against the Minister of Steel Development, Shuaibu Audu, as it relates to the National Steel Council, NSE. In a release by the ministry says the allegations of misgovernance are a mere ploy by some individuals with vested interest to sabotage the efforts of the minister in repositioning the steel and metal sector. It states that contrary to the allegations, the Minister of Steel Development, upon assuming duty, interfaced with the Executive Secretary of the Steel Council, where he received briefings on allegations bordering on various issues that were on ground between the National Steel Council and its governing board. He had since set up a fact-finding committee on February the 9th, 2024, to investigate the several allegations at the council.
Well, Arise business anchor Bosun Amofaye joins us now to discuss all of these stories. Very good to have you this Friday afternoon.
It's a Thank God Friday.
Thank God it's Friday.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, let's talk about the World Bank and Ethiopia. They've signed loan agreements totaling $1.72 billion to enhance their electricity and water supply. Can you take us through this?
Yes, the Ethiopia is Africa's second most populous economy, and this is coming after Nigeria with about 180 roughly in terms of population. So it's quite 160, 180 or thereabouts. So it's quite very populous. And it's also sitting in a very strategic corner between the Sahel region and East Africa. And of course, you've got the Horn of Africa, Burundi, Djibouti, Somalia, and a few others. So it's got its own fair share of geopolitical issues and then very adverse climate conditions. Remember, Ethiopia decades ago went through a very severe famine with thousands of deaths, as it were. But it has since recovered, and the current administration and the one before it, we have the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed right now, and the one before it, the gentleman, president who died a couple of years ago, had been able to bring Ethiopia back to a record in terms of economic reforms. And current Prime Minister Abiy has been doing so much in terms of financial reforms in the sector. They're setting up they have a commodity exchange, which was opened around 2011 or so. Nigeria's former President Goodluck Jonathan was there in 2012 during the World Economic Forum for Africa. I was also there as a journalist. And since then, we've seen Safaricom open up with that iconic Kenyan telecommunication now operating in Ethiopia. They are also doing trying to list and do an IPO for Ethio Telecom, which is the national telecommunication company on the New Stock Exchange when it's opened sometime later this year. They've been moving very furiously. They got banks, international investors being part of the new securities exchange. But of course, over the last year or so, you've got the Tigray region rebellion, as it were, being quashed. That has cost Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, quite a chunk of money, if you ask me, in terms of prosecuting that particular war. And it's got its own problem with Egypt as far as the Renaissance Dam is concerned, which is sitting over the Nile River. That's about $40 billion, which was supposed to bring that electricity and what have you into Ethiopia very so quickly. Egypt is working with Sudan and saying, look, this is a problem for them. That hasn't really made much progress, but Ethiopia has continued to fill that dam and try to get it up and running. So the country needs electricity very quickly. It needs road infrastructure, which had been damaged by the war in the Tigray region, and of course you've got the water resources that also need to. So between water, electricity, and then you have the drought and the adverse climate conditions. And this is one story that those of us in the media need to take very seriously as we speak. 4 African countries in the list are getting under the problem of climate crisis as far as drought is concerned. Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and South Africa, where crops are whittling down because of, so you've got a food insecurity and inflation coming up here. So you take this from Southern Africa to Ethiopia in North Africa, and Ethiopia in the north to the northeast. Eastern part of the continent is at the center of Ethiopia because the landmass and what have you. So this is one good deal. They've been, the IMF team had been in Addis Ababa over time. They just finished one yesterday. We thought there was no deal on the table. Then suddenly we heard the news from Washington that there's a deal for this close to $2 billion that Prime Minister Abiy and his team will have. And I think it's one very good news that Ethiopia can use at this time to support the country. They need banking sector privatization, they need telecom, they need financial markets and what have you. And I think it's a good time to support Ethiopia moving forward.
Good to hear.
Well, very well said. Now, moving on, Africa's trade volume is projected to shrink in the first half of 2024. What are your thoughts?
Well, the Somali pirates are back on the waters where you've got, because the Houthis are firing at the Red Sea and the vessels. So the Somali rebels, who seem to have that threat that receded, now is rearing his ugly head once again. So you've got a lot of reports coming up this week, since last week, that the Somali rebel pirates are back on the waters because the European forces and task force that used to be around those areas have since gone. They got another serious issue to deal with. So you've got this problem re-emerging around Somalia, and that is not going to be good news for those who are within that corridor. If you take it a little bit down to Mombasa Port, to Kenya, and down to Tanzania, what have you, the Al-Shabaab and what have you, this is not something that we need to happen right now. So the Red Sea attacks is going to be a very major issue, as the Afreximbank report has shown. Africa ought to be benefiting from the rerouting of those ships down the Cape of Good Hope in Southern Africa, but we don't have the right facilities down there. Even South Africa, with Transnet troubles and the whole logistic problem in Southern Africa, we can't take advantage of this of ocean-going vessels bypassing the Red Sea and using the bottom side of the tip of Africa at the bottom to trade. So we're not taking advantage of this as far as maritime trade is maritime facility is concerned. And then we've got some of these vessels coming through with goods. We're highly import dependent, whether it's Ethiopia, Kenya. We're going to bring in fuel into Uganda, piping it and getting the vessels in through Mombasa Port and a few other ports east of the continent. It's all coming to Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, and other countries that are inland. If you look at West Africa with Nigeria and a few others as well, we're still doing heavy import, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and a few other economies within the West Coast. So either ways, we're not looking good, as it were, in terms of trade. So we're going to see this impact our trade. It's going to impact our inflation. Prices of consumer goods would be definitely be impacted by this increase in escalation of geopolitical tensions. How soon will the Middle East crisis, Israel, Hamas, Gaza, whatever, Iran, how soon is going to come? And no one knows. We're now trading oil at about $91 per barrel. That's for Nigeria's budget-tied London Brent crude. That's some good news if you are selling or you have the volume, if you have the turnover to pump out. Right now, it doesn't look good for Nigeria. We're doing about 1.3 million barrels per day, so that's still good news. Our budget for this year is 1.7. Our estimate for this year is 1.7 million barrels per day. We're doing about 1.3. We had a shortfall in February and also in March, according to latest data. So it's not looking really good for Africa, but that means that we have to rethink the whole intra-Africa trade very quickly and become more productive within the four corners of the continent so that we can produce and trade amongst ourselves very quickly, so that anytime we have these geopolitical issues around the continent, whether it is in the Western world or you have it in the Middle East or it's coming from the Asia-Pacific region and all of that, the Indian subcontinent and what have you, we'll have something to cushion it for us. But right now, it's not really looking good, and we just hope that we'll be able to mitigate this moving forward.
All right. Well, let's leave that and go over to Zimbabwe. They've launched this new gold-backed currency. It's called ZiG. What do you think about that?
Don't ask me if I have the gold.
Actually, it's been by that. We're going to go ask if she's...
no, it's going to be officially on the street. I saw what you put out there on TV. I was just looking at, okay, yeah, well, we don't know. The country has about 5 currencies right now, so it depends on which one you want to use. It's been very messy, and to put it very mildly, for Zimbabwe. And seriously speaking, the ZiG is going to come in. What Zimbabwe has done over the last year or so was to ask all the mining companies to pay royalties to the government in the mining resource. So if you're digging gold in Zimbabwe, you've got to pay your royalties in gold. So they've been able to accumulate some chunk of metric tons of gold. I'm trying to remember the exact figure now, as at the last time they reported, January, February. So they've ramped up very quickly on that, so they've got the reserves in gold. So they're introducing a currency backed by that gold, and then other currencies can also free float within the country, the US dollar. The Zimbabweans are as stubborn as they were. They are not going back on the fact that they got to use their own currency. They don't want. The finance minister, Ntuli Ntube, has said there's no going back to using the US dollar as the fiat and the only currency in the country. So they're sticking with the Zimbabwean dollar, and they're trying to re-engineer the dollar. They're trying to re-modify. They're trying to do everything to prop it up and have their own currency that they can depend on. And I can relate with that so well, because you want to destroy any country, destroy the currency. Take it all down to the cleaners. Take it down to the toilet and just flush it down. And then you've got all issue here. Look at Nigeria. With currency redenomination we had last year, or the currency redesign and what have you. Look at how much stress folks went through. Then you would talk about the whole exchange rate flotation and what have you. So once you hit the currency, you hit the nerve center of everyone, because money is everything from life to death. So that means that you can't escape money. You can't escape currency. So Zimbabwe will have to deal with this, but let's see over the next few days and week how the new currency will go. I'm trying to see how they have until later this month to bring in all the banknotes and bring in the backed currency, the ZiG. Let's see how that will work for investment in assets, in financial assets, how that will go into normal consumer spending on the street. Remember, the gold notes that Zimbabwe Central Bank, the Reserve Bank, reintroduced about a year or so ago is also still there on the street, in which you can use gold. You can trade some gold coins, as it were, buy some denomination and whatever, and you can use it for transactions and what have you through the banks and all of that. The idea is to try to de-dollarize the Zimbabwean economy, make sure that they reduce the weight, the impact of the US dollar on the economy, so that they can begin to work their way back from the dollar being the fiat currency, and they have some dependence on their own local currency. That's the whole way, but it's a very tough one for President Emerson Mnangagwa right now and his team on how he was going to walk this through, because they have another election just around the corner. After South Africa has done theirs at the end of May, I think they got an election in Zimbabwe sometime very soon. I think it's about 5 years already in power. So it's due for either re-election or whatever happens next, overdue, politically speaking.
All right, business.
But a very nice name, ZiG.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, it looks very nice.
It's catchy.
It's catchy. You got it. Catchy.
All right, business anchor, Boston Omofaye, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend.